I played invisible at my parents' brunch, until one sentence brought their web of lies crashing down. You ever sit at a table full of people who are supposed to love you and feel more invisible than the coffee mug in your hands? That was me last Sunday. My mother leaned across her plate of eggs Benedict, eyes sharp as broken glass, and said, "You are nothing, Laura. Stop pretending you matter." And my brother Cameron, always ready with the perfect comeback, laughed and added, "Honestly, we forget you even exist most of the time." The air in their pristine dining room went still. My fork trembled just once before I caught it, steadied my hand, and tapped it softly against my water glass. A little clink, like a bell ringing in an empty cathedral. "This won't take long," I told them. "Just 3 sentences." Their chewing slowed. My mother's smile cracked, faint but visible. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. Because when you grow up in a house like mine in suburban Connecticut, you learn to wear your face like armor. I'd been back under their roof for 3 months, sleeping in what used to be the home office they'd converted into storage. Told them I couldn't afford my apartment in Hartford anymore, that I needed help getting back on my feet. My mother gave me the cramped space behind the garage, not the guest room, not even my old bedroom. No, the storage room where the washing machine hummed all night like a broken heart. Every evening, I told myself I could take it. Just long enough. Because I wasn't there to reconnect or heal old wounds. I was there to find something they never expected me to discover. At brunch, I played my part perfectly. Poured fresh orange juice, passed the artisanal butter, smiled at my stepfather Richard's tired jokes about millennials not knowing how to balance checkbooks. Ironic, since I'd been managing their household expenses for weeks. I was the polite ghost at their mahogany table. Present but never truly seen, until that moment. The manila folder in my leather bag, plain and unremarkable, just heavy enough to change 3 lives forever. I slid it across the polished wood surface. My mother's manicured hand hesitated above it like she could sense the danger. She opened it slowly. 1 page. 2. Her face drained color like someone had pulled the plug on her entire existence. Richard's chair screeched back against the hardwood floor. Cameron froze mid-bite, fork hovering like a question mark in the air. By the last page, her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You little snake," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. I stood, adjusted my cardigan, slung my bag over my shoulder. Calm. Collected. "The originals are with people who matter," I said, my voice steady as stone. "That copy is just for your personal enjoyment." And I walked out of that house for what I knew would be the last time. But that wasn't the beginning. The beginning was when I was 12 years old, sitting in our old living room in Westfield, eating stale popcorn while watching reruns of Full House. My mother walked in and turned off the television with a sharp click. She held out her iPhone, screen glowing with a text message that would reshape my entire world. "If you take her from me, I'll destroy you both." She told me it was from my father. I remember staring at those words like they were written in ancient hieroglyphs, something I couldn't possibly understand. The message felt wrong, like wearing someone else's shoes. My mother sat beside me on our faded couch, rubbing my back with what I thought was love and protection. She told me Dad was dangerous, unstable, that she was filing for full custody to keep me safe. That night, my father vanished from my life. No phone calls, no weekend visits, no birthday cards. Just gone, like he'd never existed at all. I believed her story for years, believed it until belief started feeling like a boulder sitting on my chest every time I thought about him. Because my dad, he was the man who cried during Toy Story 3, who made Mickey Mouse pancakes on Saturday mornings, who remembered every single book I'd ever mentioned wanting to read. That threatening message didn't sound like the man who taught me to ride a bike in Riverside Park, who stayed up all night helping me build a volcano for the school science fair, who called me his little shooting star because I always reached for things that seemed impossible. The disconnect gnawed at me through middle school, high school, college. Every Father's Day felt like a funeral for someone who might still be alive. When I turned 22 and graduated from the University of Connecticut with a degree in digital communications, I finally worked up the courage to send a text to his old number. "Hi, I don't know if this is still your number, but it's Laura. Hello." 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a response that made my hands shake. "Laura, sweetheart, I've been waiting 10 years for this message." We met at a small cafe in downtown Hartford called The Daily Grind. When I walked in and saw him sitting by the window, older but unmistakably my dad. Something inside me that had been holding its breath for a decade finally exhaled. I asked him straight out, no preamble, "Did you send that message? The threatening one?" He looked me in the eyes, calm and steady as I remembered, and shook his head. "Laura, I never would have written those words. Not to you, not about you. Never." In that moment, my gut finally went quiet. The doubt I'd carried like a secret weight disappeared, replaced by something much more dangerous, certainty. So I dug. But not like an amateur with hurt feelings and conspiracy theories. I got serious. I enrolled in night classes, studied digital forensics, learned about metadata and electronic evidence. I became a licensed private investigator, specializing in cybercrime and document analysis. Every skill I learned was another tool in my arsenal, another way to uncover the truth that had been buried under a decade of lies. The decision to move back home wasn't emotional, it was strategic. I told my mother and Richard that my graphic design business had failed, that I was behind on rent, that I needed just a few months to get back on my feet. My mother's face lit up with barely concealed satisfaction. She loved having me there, small and defeated, proof of her superiority. "Of course, darling," she said, though her smile never reached her eyes. "Family helps family." They gave me the converted storage space behind the garage, a cramped room that smelled like motor oil and old Christmas decorations. Every night, the water heater would kick on with a groan that sounded like someone in pain. I lay on my narrow bed, surrounded by boxes of their old junk, and planned my next move. During the day, I played the grateful, slightly pathetic daughter. I did their laundry, ran errands, smiled at Richard's condescending jokes about my failed career. But while they slept in their king-sized bed upstairs, I worked. I installed keyloggers on their shared computer. I recovered deleted files from old hard drives I found in the basement. I traced email accounts, followed digital breadcrumbs, mapped out a timeline that stretched back 15 years. The work was painstaking, methodical. Each piece of evidence had to be verified, documented, preserved according to legal standards. 3 weeks into my investigation, I found the smoking gun. Hidden in a folder labeled Tax Documents 2010, buried on an external hard drive that Richard thought he'd wiped clean, was a Word document containing the exact text of the threatening message my mother had shown me years ago. But this version had something the screenshot didn't: edit history, comments, revision marks. In the margins, in my mother's handwriting, were notes: "Too dramatic? Make it sound more threatening. Add something about custody." There was even a comment bubble with feedback from Richard: "Perfect. This will destroy him in court." The creation date was 3 days before my mother claimed to have received the message from my father. 3 days before she used it to convince a 12-year-old girl that her father was a monster. My hands shook as I screenshot every page, copied every file, documented every piece of evidence with timestamps and digital signatures. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a coordinated campaign to steal my childhood, my relationship with my father, and as I was about to discover, a whole lot more. The deeper I dug, the more elaborate their scheme became. It wasn't just about custody or even about getting my father out of our lives. It was about money, lots of it. My parents had been planning their deception for months before they even separated, mapping out how to hide assets, manipulate court proceedings, and emerge with everything while leaving my father with nothing. I found emails between my mother and Richard dating back to when she was still married to my dad, when Richard was just the family friend who came to barbecues and birthday parties. Their correspondence read like a criminal conspiracy manual. Phase 1, document his instability, my mother had written. Phase 2, secure the house and accounts. Phase 3, disappear the money before the divorce is final. They'd been having an affair for 2 years before my parents officially separated, using that time to slowly drain joint accounts, transfer assets to shell companies Richard controlled, and build a fake paper trail of my father's supposed mental health issues. Every family emergency that required quick cash, every investment opportunity that couldn't wait, every temporary loan to help Richard's consulting business, it was all part of their plan. The fake threatening message was just the beginning. They'd created dozens of documents, forged emails, doctored bank statements, even fake medical records claiming my father had been treated for anger management issues. My mother had been particularly proud of her performance in family court, playing the terrified ex-wife protecting her daughter from an unstable man. The judge had bought every lie, granting her full custody and ordering my father to pay alimony from assets he no longer technically owned. But their greed had made them sloppy. Every wire transfer left a digital footprint. Every forged document contained metadata that proved when and where it had been created. Every lie was documented somewhere in their sprawling digital archive of deceit. They'd kept everything, probably as insurance against each other, never imagining that their own daughter would one day become their prosecutor. I found offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, real estate purchases hidden behind corporate shells, investment portfolios worth millions that should have been part of the divorce settlement. My father had been awarded half of what he thought were their total assets, not knowing that the real fortune was hidden in a maze of legal entities and international banks. The most damaging evidence was in my mother's personal journal, which she'd foolishly kept as a digital file on her laptop. Entry after entry detailed their schemes, their celebrations after successful court hearings, their plans for the future. "Richard thinks we should buy the boat next year," she'd written just after the divorce was finalized. "We've earned it after everything we've put ourselves through." Everything they'd put themselves through. Not what they'd done to my father. Not what they'd stolen from our family. What they'd endured as if they were the victims in their own elaborate. I didn't just want evidence, I wanted justice. And justice required allies. My first call was to Marcus Thompson, a forensic accountant who specialized in hidden assets and financial fraud. I'd met him during my PI training, and he owed me a favor after I'd helped him track down some missing cryptocurrency in a divorce case. Marcus took one look at my evidence and whistled low. "Laura, this isn't just fraud. This is racketeering. You're looking at federal charges." Next, I contacted Amanda Rodriguez, a family law attorney who'd built her reputation fighting for father's rights in custody cases. Amanda had seen plenty of parental alienation cases, but nothing quite like this. "The systematic nature of it," she said, spreading my documents across her conference table, "the forged evidence, the financial manipulation, this is going to make headlines." My father was the hardest conversation. When I called and asked him to meet me at the daily grind again, he sounded worried. "Laura, you don't sound like yourself. Is everything okay?" I couldn't tell him over the phone. This wasn't something you explained in a text or a quick call. When I slid a copy of my evidence across the cafe table, he went quiet for a long time, turning pages with shaking hands. "My God," he whispered finally. "I knew she was lying about some things, but this is my entire life. Our entire marriage was a lie." He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Laura, you found your way back to me, and now you've found the truth. I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," I told him. "We have work to do." The FBI Financial Crimes Unit was surprisingly interested in our case. Agent Patricia Wells explained that they'd been looking for exactly this kind of systematic fraud, the type that required coordination between multiple parties, crossed state lines, and involved significant sums of money. "Your mother and stepfather didn't just steal from your father," she said during our first meeting. "They committed wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. If we can prove everything in your documents, they're looking at serious prison time." Building the case took 2 more months. Every document had to be authenticated, every transaction traced, every piece of digital evidence verified by independent experts. I continued living in that cramped storage room, playing my role as the down-on-her-luck daughter while secretly coordinating with federal agents, attorneys, and forensic specialists. The hardest part was watching my mother and Richard live their lie every day, seeing them enjoy the fruits of their theft, listening to them complain about minor inconveniences while my father had spent years rebuilding a life they'd systematically destroyed. But I held on to Amanda's words. "Justice isn't about revenge, Laura. It's about truth. And the truth is powerful enough to tear down any lie, no matter how well constructed." The Sunday I chose for the reveal wasn't random. It was exactly 10 years to the day since my mother had shown me that fake threatening message, 10 years since my father had disappeared from my life. I wanted the symbolism to be perfect, the circle to be complete. I wore my best dress, did my hair, even put on the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. If this was going to be my final performance in their house, I wanted to look the part. Brunch started normally enough. My mother made her famous French toast, Richard brewed his expensive coffee, Cameron showed up fashionably late with stories about his latest girlfriend. We sat around their polished dining table like we were a normal, loving family instead of a crime syndicate having its last meal together. The conversation followed its usual patterns, Subtle digs at my failed career, passive-aggressive comments about my living situation, Cameron's endless bragging about his job in finance. I played along, nodding at the right moments, laughing at Richard's terrible jokes, pretending not to notice when my mother exchanged those little looks with him, the ones that said, "Look how pathetic she is." When I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila folder, my mother barely glanced at it. "What's that, dear?" "More job applications." The condescension in her voice was so thick you could spread it on toast. Richard chuckled into his mimosa. Cameron didn't even look up from his phone. "Not exactly," I said, sliding the folder across the table. "More like a family history project." My mother opened it with the casual confidence of someone who believed she was untouchable. The first page was a copy of the fake threatening message, but this time with all the metadata visible, all the edit history preserved, all the evidence of manipulation clearly documented. I watched her face change as she realized what she was looking at. "Page 2 is interesting," I said conversationally, pouring myself more orange juice. "That's the email thread between you and Richard, planning the whole thing. The timeline is fascinating. You were discussing how to neutralize Dad 6 months before you even filed for divorce." Richard's face had gone white. Cameron finally looked up from his phone, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. "What's going on?" he asked, but no one answered him. "Page 3 through 15 are the financial records," I continued. "Wire transfers, offshore accounts, shell companies." Agent Wells was particularly impressed with the Cayman Islands setup. She said it showed sophisticated criminal enterprise. I emphasized those last 2 words, letting them hang in the air like smoke. My mother's hands were shaking now. "Laura, what have you done?" "What you taught me to do," I replied calmly. "I found the truth." 3 nights after I walked out of that house for the last time, there was a knock on the door of my new apartment in downtown Hartford. I opened it to find my father standing there with the biggest smile I'd seen on his face in years. He didn't say hello, just grinned and announced, "I got the call from Amanda. It's happening. The dominoes are falling." The legal proceedings moved faster than anyone expected. Federal charges were filed within a week: conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and perjury. The state added charges for custody fraud and criminal impersonation. Asset seizure orders froze every account, every property, every investment they'd hidden over the years. Their perfect suburban life evaporated like morning mist. My mother tried one last desperate gambit, creating a fake social media account in my name and posting wild accusations about abuse and hacking. She claimed I'd manipulated the evidence, that I was mentally unstable, that this was all revenge for some imagined childhood trauma. But the IP address traced directly back to their Wi-Fi network, and the digital forensics team found the account creation records on her laptop. Even the judge shook his head in disbelief at her continued deception. Cameron disappeared the moment their bank accounts were frozen, moving to Seattle and cutting off all contact. Richard tried to claim ignorance, playing the naive husband manipulated by his scheming wife, but his name was on too many documents, his fingerprints on too many transactions. The evidence didn't lie, even when everyone else did. The trial made local news: suburban mom's decade-long fraud scheme exposed by daughter's investigation. Court TV picked up the story. Dateline called for an interview. My mother became a cautionary tale about greed, manipulation, and the dangers of underestimating your own children. She wrote me one final email from her lawyer's office while awaiting sentencing. Subject line: "You'll understand one day." I archived it without reading past the first line, filing it in a folder I labeled fiction. Some stories aren't worth finishing. Now I live in a bright apartment with hardwood floors and windows that actually open. My father visits every Sunday, not for brunch, but for pizza and bad movies. He tells the same terrible dad jokes he used to tell when I was 12, the ones that make you roll your eyes but warm your heart. We're building new memories to replace the stolen ones, creating a future that no one can forge or manipulate or take away. They used to tell me I was nobody, that I didn't matter, that they forgot I existed. But nobodies, we notice things. We remember. We wait. And when the time comes, we don't have to scream or shout or make dramatic gestures. We just tell the truth, and we let the truth do what it does best: tear down lies and build something better in their place. The truth always wins in the end. It just sometimes takes a nobody to find it.